Welcome, everyone, to the Good Leadership Podcast. My name is Charles Good, your host. This podcast is designed to provide you with actionable insights and strategies that you can apply from discussing the research from esteemed leadership experts and thought leaders. My goal is that what we discuss today will be immediately actionable and useful to you. And I'd love to hear your comments for this episode in the chat, as well as what you're planning to implement. My guest today is Helene Segura. She's a productivity expert and the Inefficiency Assassin who helps companies and agencies lower employee stress levels, decrease absenteeism, improve retention and leadership, and increase revenue. She is known for her thought-provoking yet entertaining time management keynotes and programs that teach practical productivity tools for leaders. Helene delivers an experience that resonates deeply and inspires change, and she's been featured on over 150 media interviews and is the author of 3 books. Her latest is The Inefficiency Assassin, Time Management Tactics for Working Smarter, Not Longer. Welcome to the podcast, Helene.
Thank you, Charles.
I'd love to start out with that title, right, of your latest book, The Inefficiency Assassin. Tell me a little bit more about that and how you became known as the Inefficiency Assassin.
Well, we all have strengths and we all have the opposite of strengths. And my opposite of strength, one of them is marketing. So I decided to take a marketing class, and I was told that the job title of productivity consultant or time management consultant was rather boring. So I needed to think about what I actually did and how I delivered it, and could I get some pizzazz? So one day my husband and I were on a 2-hour drive. There was not any kind of nice scenery. So we spent our time talking instead of looking around at everything. And we just started brainstorming ideas. And by the end of the drive, we had decided that I help people slay lost time. So what does that make me? The Inefficiency Assassin. And then that's how it was born.
Love that. Love that. That's great. So this topic, I think, resonates equally well today as it did 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. If anything, it's probably even more relevant today because people have more on their plate. They're more overwhelmed. They don't know how to get everything done. So there's always this talk about productivity systems. Which one is the best? Which one provides the most impact right away? So I'd love to start our conversation today talking about maybe not all of the different types of productivity systems, but the 2 big types right now, which from Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, he really pushes the kind of that fixed time block productivity system. And then there's others that have the task systems, the task-oriented systems that are the to-do list. Time block, you give every minute a job to do and you manage it by the hours. Whereas those task-oriented systems, you're giving it the task-oriented list. You're focusing on the task, not the time, to get as much as you can done in a period of a day. Let's first talk about that time block and time blocking. When is this type of system really useful for people? And maybe some of the advantages of it, some of the weaknesses of it, and what is the best way to try to implement it?
Time blocking is extremely useful if you have mapped out the different categories of your job responsibilities or your personal responsibilities. Because when you use time blocking at the 35,000 foot level, you are deciding ahead of time how much of your life you want to dedicate to all of these different areas, all of these different responsibilities. And in order to be able to do this, you actually have to backtrack and clearly identify what are your responsibilities. That's part of the issue we have, is that if those responsibilities are not crystal clear in our minds, we tend to go after low-hanging fruit. So with the time blocking, you map out a general draft of where you want your time to go. And then you can drill down into that and get very specific with your time block. So you can map out how much time you're going to spend on any given project, any given task. And time blocking is extremely helpful because it gives you a focus for the day. It also helps you negotiate time with others. Somebody else wants to drop something in your lap at the last minute. You have a better idea what is a priority and what can wait for a bit. And that helps you negotiate time. But the downside I see of time blocking is if somebody time blocks every single minute of their day, without allowing room for the unexpected. If you work with humans and or if you work with technology, and you've heard this before, Charles, when I've said it, your day is never going to go according to plan. So if you have scheduled out every single second, every single minute of your day, that is just not going to work because the unexpected will happen if you're not working in a silo. And that's why one of the time blocks we should allow for is the unexpected. So if you time block for that as well, a little bit of time in the morning, a little bit of time in the afternoon, that will help you. So time blocking overall is extremely beneficial.
One of the things I've noticed that's a weakness of it is that you set time blocks for certain activities you want to do throughout the day. And when I've used it, it's been helpful because if you can prioritize the most important things that you put in those time blocks,
Mhm.
especially first thing in the day, that really helps to set that priority, which you kind of talk about with your 3+3 philosophy.
Mhm.
But the critics of this state that, well, you may not be as productive because you're just allocating time for these tasks. You're not pushing yourself to get these done. So you may take longer to, in fact, do those
Mhm.
since it's not a task oriented list where you can check off the task being done. But I found this productivity system to be really beneficial for these long-term projects, for deep work sessions where you just need to allocate the time each and every day to
Mhm.
make meaningful progress on those goals. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And the second method of time management that you mentioned outside of time blocking would be the task oriented system. I personally don't feel that they should operate in two separate realms. I think they need to operate together. It is important to time block to have an idea of where you need your time to go, but then you need to specify what that time will be used for. So if you just time block something and call it project, what does that mean? That is way too generic for your brain. You need something specific, which is when you move into task orientation, and part of the task orientation also needs to include time estimation. A lot of us don't even think about how much time something is going to take. So that's why, like you mentioned, we might choose one task and then expand to fit the time that we've allotted for it. Or what is usually the case, people will jot down everything that they need to do without thinking about those time estimations. And then they're completely demoralized at the end of the day when they realize, oh, I didn't get these other 10 things done. Well, that's because you put 15 hours worth of work on your list when you actually only had 2 hours between all of your meetings. So I think it's very important to use both the overview of time blocking and then bring in that task orientation, including time estimation.
No, that's great because I, I love that approach and I do that myself. I try to time block that first part of the day to make sure that I get into those most important things, but then there's always these tasks that need to be done as well.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, when they start a task oriented system, you're right, they put too much on their list. So they think they can do too much. Inevitably, it's always too much, not too little. And they're very bad at guessing how much time each task takes initially. So
Mhm.
I would caution people when you start this is test it out for a few weeks and you're going to have to refine the model, right?
Mhm.
And get a better sense of okay, this really takes me or if you don't do it that way, maybe just put buffer times in. So if you think it's going to take an hour, let's just put 2 hours in just to be sure and make sure you put buffer times in if you're doing time blocking with break times, with food, with other things as well, right?
Exactly. I think it's very important that you build in those buffer times, or if people don't like the word buffer, you can call them cushion times, whatever adjective you want to use to describe it. But the whole point is if you haven't done something before, then chances are you have no idea of exactly how long it'll take. And especially nowadays, when so many of us are experiencing delays, if we are relying on somebody else to get us information, there are supply chain issues, there are labor issues. So we definitely need to make sure we build in that cushion. And like you said, you can double it. For some people, they might start off quadrupling it, and the beauty of the task list, and I'm sure we'll get into the 3+3 later, is that you are identifying several priorities. So you can move into the next one if you have that extra time, or move into the next one because the prior one didn't work out the way you wanted to. But just making sure that you have that room in case things don't go as planned.
No, I love that. I love how to integrate these systems together and use them simultaneously. It's not an either or decision.
Hmm.
Let's actually talk about that 3+3 philosophy because I love it
Hmm.
in regards to getting those most important things done each day and making it a priority. So if you could unpack that for us, that would be great.
Sure. A lot of my clients have a common challenge in that they struggle with staying asleep at night. And psychologists and neuroscientists will tell you that some of that can be caused by overactive brain. And what I've found is that when people do a mind liberation at the end of the day and get all of their thoughts, all of their worries, everything out of their mind, they actually are able to sleep better at night and just relax. Well, part of this mind liberation is the 3+3. It is figuring out what are the top three priorities you truly need to focus on and get accomplished the next day. And do we have more than three things to do? Of course, we have lists a mile long. But that old saying, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority, that's really true. And your brain needs help in what to focus on. So when you choose what your focus is going to start with the next day, then your brain is already working on fire as soon as you kick off the workday the next day. So your first three would be the top three priorities. Your plus three is moving down your list. So you chose one, two, three. Now you're actually moving into four, five, six. So that would be your plus three. The next three levels of priorities. And you choose those for two reasons. Number one, it could be a bonus. So let's say all the stars align and you actually get to finish those top three priorities because everybody got you what they needed to. After you do your little happy dance, then you can move into the plus three. So that way you can continue being productive, continue achieving, checking off those high priorities. Or what tends to happen quite often is instead of the bonus three, it's actually a backup three because there is a hitch with something you're trying to accomplish from the top three. There's nothing you can do about it. And when we get into these situations and negativity starts to infuse our brain and drag us down, we tend to go after low hanging fruit, which is not a great thing. So that's why if you've chosen your backup three, after you throw a little tantrum, decompress a little bit, then your brain can get refocused faster so you can continue working on higher level priorities instead of the not so important things.
No, that's love that philosophy. And that's a lot of times what I do at night is I have that shutdown complete
Mhm.
and then plan the next day and try to get into those MITs, those most important tasks. And if I have finished those for the day, then like what you were just saying, those plus threes are great to add just to make you feel all the more productive. I find that we backslide with our productivity for a couple reasons, and I love to get your insights on this as well. The first one is unsustainable productivity. I get into a productivity system, and initially, which I should be doing, this is the goal that I think everyone supports, is that when you go into a productivity system, don't aim to get more done, just the same amount done. But I think, okay, I've implemented this system. Now I want 2x, 5x, 10x more done, and that's unsustainable, right?
Mhm. Exactly. One of the steps you want to take when you're embarking on this time management journey or productivity improvement journey is identifying exactly what you feel is your challenge with time management. And how did you come up with that measurement? Because we don't specify a measurement as to have a baseline and how are we going to measure our progress and what do we think the end result should look like. We are just constantly spinning on that hamster wheel. We're chasing what we think might be time management, except we don't define specifically what we're chasing. So when you're starting off with a new productivity system, like you said, it could be that you want to maximize your time and be able to do twice as much. Or it could be that you want to do the same amount of work, but in less time. So it's really important that you define it, but it's really hard to define what your goal should be unless you establish a baseline of where you are. For some people, it might be, you know what? I realize that my time management issue is that my mind wanders. I have random thoughts throughout the day. So first, let me start paying attention to what are my random thoughts. And then once I figure out how often that happens, then I can set my goal of this is how much I want to curb back all of those random thoughts. Establish your baseline, figure out your measurement, and then decide what your goal should be.
And I would add, go slowly in increasing the workload, at least initially, so that you don't get overwhelmed right away
Mhm.
and stay with it for longer than you think you need. My goal is to stay with it for at least 60 days because like we talked about earlier, we don't know how much time each task takes.
Mhm.
Don't know what the days are going to be. Some jobs you can allocate your time and it's
Mhm.
pretty regimented.
Mhm.
Other times your boss comes in, right? They interrupt your day, your whole tasks switch, and you have to scrap what you wanted to do for the day to handle this important project or task that he or she gives.
Exactly. If I might add on just a couple of extra things, for some people, they might think that 60 days is an eternity. So I use my clients who have maybe with some anxiety about that. I encourage them for just 2 weeks. Just focus on 2 weeks because most people experience discomfort in the first 3 to 5 days. And that's when they want to throw in the towel because they're doing something different. And when we experience that discomfort, we are used to changing gears instead of working through the discomfort. So I encourage people take at least 2 weeks, aim for the 60, but you can do it 2 weeks at a time and eventually reach the 60 days. The other thing is I encourage a weekly reflection. At the end of each week, examine your wins because so many times we focus on what we didn't get done, what didn't work, and it keeps us in a negative mode. So we focus on the wins so that way we can enforce what we're doing right. Keep on doing that, but then also reflect on what didn't go right. Is there something I can do to prevent it? And for a number of people, they are on the right track with this productivity system they've chosen. It's just, they think it should stay perfect all the time, and it can't. We have to constantly revisit our system.
Those are some great tips and pieces of advice. So hopefully our listeners are listening in right now. I noticed too, getting more with kind of the philosophy of just getting more done, right? That if you succeed in fitting more in, you're going to find that the goalposts start to shift. More things will begin to seem important, meaningful, or feel like you need to do those. So work expands to fill the available time for its completion, which is I think what Parkinson's law is.
Uh huh.
So as you get better at processing your emails, getting faster and faster climbing it, you're climbing an infinitely tall ladder and you're going to feel more rushed no matter how quickly go you probably never going to reach the top. And that's kind of that efficiency trap, right? By rendering yourself more efficient, either by implementing various productivity techniques or driving yourself harder, you won't generally result in feeling that you have enough time because all else being equal, the demands are going to increase to offset any of the benefits. So it's just keeping that in mind that as you begin to grasp when there's too much to do, there's always going to be too much to do. And it's always going to fill in your day. And you need to be mindful of making sure that you still allocate time for those most important things.
Hmm.
Otherwise, they're going to be pushed out because I see this a lot with myself, with people I know, that they feel like, okay, I have this important project and I want to get it done, but I want to first clear the decks. Well, the decks fill up every night.
Uh huh.
So you never clear the decks, right? So that important project, that thing that you wanted to do that needs devoted time, long
Hmm.
periods of time, you never get around to doing because you're always filled with the emails or those other smaller tasks that you're trying to clear the decks every day before they fill up again at night. Would you agree with that? I mean, what are your thoughts around that philosophy? And as people get more efficient at doing more work's going to be put on their plate.
Right. I totally agree with that. And that's why sometimes I joke around with those who are really super achieving. I'd say, well, you better slow down. People think you can work magic and do everything, and therefore they will keep piling on you. So, caution. I do want you to have drive. I do want you to have outstanding work ethic. But at the same time, we can't go into the 200% level because you would end up driving yourself into the ground. This might sound counterintuitive, but for some folks, I encourage them to think about what they don't want instead of what they do. You know, I don't want this level of stress. I don't want to have to take an hour of each day to manage my anxiety because my anxiety levels are so high. I don't want to have to go to the doctor every 2 weeks because I have stomach issues from all of the stress. So when you think about that, that can help you curb that desire to keep on doing just a little more. I can squeeze in a little more. I'm so productive. I can still squeeze in a little more. And think about that bigger picture. And this is where time blocking can come in. And it's not just for specific tasks in the workday, it's for overall for your entire life. Where can you fit in the different pieces? And when you map this out, whether it's in an Excel spreadsheet, a calendar, or a wall full of sticky notes, when you see that physical picture, you begin to realize, wow, these are all the hours I have in the week. I really can do a lot if I say yes to what's important and say no to what is not important or delay what is less important. And that's how you can fit in those bigger projects that you want to work on without clearing the decks. Because as you correctly pointed out, the decks will never be clear, ever, ever, ever. Now, from a job point of view, that is job security because you will always have something to do. The day you have a zero to-do list, I would be very scared. Truly. It's good to have a zero to-do list for that day, but not overall. There will always be things added to the list. So it's just pausing to look at those priorities.
You're right. And getting comfortable with just having stuff on your to-do list that just sits there so that you get a little more comfortable with that anxiety if you have it of, okay,
Mhm.
I'm always going to have emails to check. I'm always going to have these things to
That's
do, but I need to make time for the most important things, which is great. Why don't now, because everyone has to deal with this even probably more now than they did maybe 5 years ago, is email and everything with emails and tips that you could provide us with decluttering. So let's first talk about two types of issues with emails. One, which I know that I experience every day, you just have an overwhelmed inbox.
Mhm.
How do you manage decluttering that inbox? Do you set aside time each day? I tend to set aside time each day, usually at the end of the day, because it doesn't require deep thinking or thought. So I
Mhm.
could use that time when I'm not as productive to kind of go through these.
Mhm.
But what have you found to be most productive in the time of day, how much time you should spend, and are there efficiency gains to be made by doing it in certain ways? So if you have, maybe you categorize emails in your inbox into three categories. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Sure. I think you hit the nail on the head as far as when to schedule time for decluttering. This is a low brain level activity. So if your best brain time is in the morning, this is not what you want to do first off in the morning. So think about that low brain time. It might be right after lunch when a lot of people experience that post lunch coma. You're coming back, you're a little sluggish. That could be a good time to do it. For those people who are starting to travel again for work, waiting at the airport is a great time to declutter your email inbox. And what I encourage people to do is go back for the previous 30 days, because if there's anything that needs to be taken care of, it's something that happened within the last 30 days. And once you've cleared those out, you begin to realize, you know what? It's been more than a month. Do I really need to do something related to this? Can I just archive it? Can I delete it? So just going back, setting that parameter of 30 days, that is helpful mentally, especially if you have 10,000 emails in your inbox. Your brain is thinking, oh my gosh, how are you going to go through all that? Something else you might consider doing is when you are going through this decluttering, sort by sender, because a lot of times you're able to clear items out quickly because you realize 10 of the emails are in the same thread. And if you just go to that first one, you can scroll through the thread and get rid of the rest. So you can consider doing that. You can also do the opposite. If you're not ready to make decisions about what might, maybe possibly be an important email, start with your junk. Those newsletters that you never read, the stores that you never shop at, the salespeople that you never talk to. And I'm sorry if anybody listening sends those out, but if it's not beneficial to you, it has no business in your inbox. So right before you select all and delete those, make sure you unsubscribe, because that prevention will help you in the future. You'll get even fewer. And then for those folks who understand rules in Gmail or Outlook or whichever system, when you start to see patterns to your emails, you can establish rules so that way they can get sorted into file folders. Let's say there are some newsletters you would like to read, but you don't have to read them. The moment they come in, you can set a filter for newsletters and make sure they go into that folder. And one day when you're procrastinating, just go through and read those newsletters and then delete them. So those are a few starter tips for decluttering email.
No, I use filters and rules a lot. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of times in which I use that. And there's a lot of tutorials on YouTube. For
Mhm.
those that are listening that don't know what that means yet or how to set up your Outlook inbox or your Gmail. Unsubscribe to me with unsubscribing, it's just tedious and time consuming. So I know that I've used there's an app called Unenroll Me. So if you
Yes.
put that in, it can just, especially as you're starting out, right? Because if you subscribe to so many,
Mhm.
going through it time and time again just is a lot of time wasted. So something like that would just put them all into the same bucket so that then you can identify which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to subscribe to, and it'll do it for you.
Mhm.
Love the other two things that you stated as well. Use a generic email address on forms or business cards. That is so great. It makes a whole lot of sense, right? But I don't know how many people do it, and I definitely do it now because otherwise I get subscribed to everything, not only from that individual or entity, but from all of the ones they've sold my information to, right?
Exactly. So I have a generic email within my business. So people who I have already made contact with and I trust them, they're not going to stick me on a list. They get my email that I manage very well. And the others, they start out with the generic one, which my assistant can also get into. So that way she can help manage that. And then separate from work, I have two different emails in my personal life. So I have my actual one that my friends and family have. And then I have my other one that I use for deliveries, tracking packages, any kind of commercial activity that in my personal world. And it sounds like a lot having four different emails, but it's not because I'm able to compartmentalize everything and really motor through what I need to without the mixture of, oh, this is personal. Oh, this is Amazon tracking. Oh, this is for my dad. I should have answered that 2 days ago. So it's a lot easier to get through.
Also, how do you use the BCC line? I don't know if many people use it that effectively, but if you could just give us some advice around that.
Yes. If there does not need to be a conversation through email, which I don't encourage in the first place, but if there does not need to be a conversation, I encourage people to use the BCC line. BCC stands for blind carbon copy, which means you only see your email address in the to line and you don't see anybody else's. And what this does is it helps prevent you and anybody else in this list from being part of a reply all that you don't care about. You don't need this information. It's not pertinent. You're not part of that conversation. And yet it's clogging up your inbox. So if other people do not need to be a part of this, use the BCC line.
Great advice around that. So the categories that you would put it into. So I say, when I look at my email, it's emails that I have to read or respond to, emails that remind me to do something in the future, or I need to be reminded of at some point in the future. And then those other ones that I just need to institute some preventative measures around. But for those that I need to read or respond to, do you recommend people doing those right now? Or the first step should be putting them into categories where it's maybe urgent, need to respond to in the next day, the next week, the next month? What would be your system for those emails where they're not junk, but you have to
Mhm.
respond at some point, but there is a priority, so you have to triage them?
Exactly. As a part of the 3+3, when you're doing your planning at the end of the day, you're deciding on your top priorities for the next day. That actually helps establish what kinds of emails you should be spending more time on. So if there's something related to one of those top three, then that's what you're diving into. You're looking to see, is there a high priority situation? I need to answer this immediately, not because it's just landed in my inbox, but because it's truly top priority. And you can spend a couple of minutes answering there. However, sometimes there are some high priority situations that take more thought. Yet somebody might continue to bother you and ask, did you get my email? Did you get my email? Did you get my email? So you might want to respond right away with received. I will get back to you with an answer by 11 a.m. So at least they know they've been acknowledged
Right.
and they know what to expect. So going through your top priorities, and then from there, once you've triaged that way, you can put them into your categories of I need to do this or I need to read this later, and either use a folder system for that. Or if you use Outlook, you can drag them into tasks. Most Outlook systems allow you to do that. Or if you don't have that dragging ability, you can also use the snooze function. So if you want to get those emails out of your view, you can snooze all the ones you want to read later at the end of the day, just have them pop up at 4 o'clock or what have you. So at least they're not distracting you from others that you need to get to.
Great advice around that with the snooze feature. I'm going to start using that
Mhm.
today.
Love me some snooze.
So now let's look at the other piece, right? So now when you're sending out emails and say you have to send out quite a few each day,
Mhm.
are there any ways to automate it to save you time so that you don't have to compose each one? Maybe you have a template, maybe there's a subject line. Any tips, tools, or strategies that you can give our listeners regarding when they have to send out emails and making them
Mhm.
more automated?
Yes, the template is definitely the way to go. Within most email systems, you can actually save and name a template. And if you're not sure how to do that, or if your system doesn't offer you that option, you can just use a Word document for your templates and bring it up when you're ready to copy and paste into there. If you do use templates and information needs to be changed, I highly recommend that you bold font the parts that need to be changed so you don't forget to change it. Because this is where some people have an issue where they want to do some customizations, but they have the base of the template there, but then they forget to change a name or they forget to change the date. So make sure you bold face those. And the reason why I choose bold instead of highlight is because I have found that sometimes the highlight function does not turn off. And then you have this email with highlights in there. So it was very obvious. You just went in and changed everything. So you might try the bold function. And there are also automated email systems when you want to send out mass emails to say 50 people or 100 people. So you could look into platforms like that. Very simple ones would be MailChimp or iContact. There's Constant Contact. And there are some companies that also have their mass email systems. So if that's the case, you can check into the one at your company.
I've even found doing mail merges on Outlook and whatnot. If you have a list that you always send to, so much easier than trying to copy and paste a list or make sure you capture everyone. Just simple
Mhm.
common sense things like that over time save save you time and are much more efficient.
Exactly. And I have a quick tip. It's not scientifically proven, but anybody who's listening can try it out. If I want somebody to think about it, and I know I don't want to respond to their response right away, I might send that out at 4:30 at the end of the day. So that way they can take their time and I even say, hey, you don't have to get back to me till the next morning because I want them to put thought into it. Or if it's something that I really need them to see, instead of sending it first thing in the morning where they're trying to plow through all of the emails that came in overnight, I'll send it at around 9:45 or 10:15 because it's usually at that point in the morning that we kind of start thinking about taking a break. And if we're procrastinating, we jump into our email. And that's when a lot of people do email checks.
That's a great tip to make. So regarding emails, maybe this is a good time to talk about chop days. I love this concept that you've developed because I think we need those. And I would say twice a month for 2 half days is a great approach to try. You might need to adjust it upward or downward, but can you go over those chop days and really what they entail?
So CHOP is CHOP, which stands for crap, highly hay, onsens, and pilly stuff. Those are those little tasks that just linger and they hang around and they stay in the backs of our minds. And they're not those top level priorities, but they still eventually need to get done. So instead of using those for your procrastination time and from escaping working on priorities, if you have already time blocked a chop day or a half day, or maybe it's a Friday afternoon for a couple of hours, you can wipe out all of those low hanging tasks that aren't high level, but they still need to get done. And it clears your brain because you don't want all of those hundreds of thoughts lingering in your brain, spinning around and getting in the way of your high level brain power that you need for handling tougher situations.
Love those days and love doing them a couple times a month. Sometimes I feel like I need to do those more, but once again, that gets into time that really needs to be reserved for those more important tasks.
Mhm.
So before we end, one more topic I love to cover regarding time management, and that's procrastination. That
Can we talk about that later? I'm just kidding.
oh yeah. Yep. That's a topic that I think everyone struggles with because that's the enemy of time management or efficiency. And
Mhm.
I don't know if there is a tried and true way to do it. I know that here are some techniques that's worked for me. I'd love for you to expand upon those, Helene, and then give some of your own. The Pomodoro technique, 25 minutes on, take a 5 to 10 minute break, another 25 minutes. The MIT method, make sure you identify those most important tasks each day. And what's really helped me with procrastination, because I think, when you get tired and you just start to get more distracted and there's other temptations that come on in your mind about, I'm getting hungry, I need to go check out what's for dinner or a snack,
Mhm.
is setting an endurance target. That's really helped me. So when I start to have those feelings of hunger, or I feel like I'm getting distracted, or those temptations arise, I just continue on for another 5 to 10 minutes. And what I find a lot of time is those distractions pass. And I'm able to work for not just 10 minutes, but 30 more minutes before I really need to then take a break. Do you agree with some of those? And what are some of your most coveted pieces of advice around procrastination or techniques to combat it?
I agree with all of those. And let's see if I could remember them working backwards. The last one with endurance. If we are wired for supreme executive function, that means our brain makes really sharp decisions. And even though it gets a little distracted, we can get refocused right away. If we're not wired like that, then the endurance part can be really tough. So I would say that if you can push through that extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes to train your brain to get refocused, that's great. But if you find that it's not working for you, that is a sign that you should probably get up and take a 5 minute break. And one of the best breaks you can take is just walking around to go get a drink of water, because you need to walk around in order to increase your circulation. That also stimulates thinking and brain power. And we all need water to stay hydrated. So many of us are, dehydrated, and time management is all about mind management. So you really need to take care of your body, the housing for your brain. So that's water and that is circulation. And then for your MITs, that is helping you with focus. And part of the reason why we procrastinate is because we don't have that focus. So by pausing to choose the 3+3, by pausing to choose the MITs, that is helping you build in focus. When you get a little distracted, you go back to that 3+3 list or that MIT list and you get refocused right away. So that also helps with procrastination. The other thing is to understand what procrastination is. Psychologists define it as the act of wanting to feel better now. So it's basically the adult version of a 2-year-old. I don't want a tantrum. We don't want to do something because we have to make a decision, or because it's hard, or because it's boring, or we see this other task that we need to do that seems a lot more fun. We would rather do that. So if you can get to the core causes of your procrastination and identify those, that will actually help you prevent it in the future, with the understanding that procrastination is part of human nature. You are going to want to procrastinate. So it's unrealistic to say, my goal is to never, ever procrastinate again. That's just not going to happen. But the key is, can you catch yourself going into procrastination mode and then redirect? Looking at what can I get done right now to make my life even better? Or how will procrastinating right now benefit me? If you can pause and ask yourself those questions, you can redirect yourself and then cut off that procrastination.
Love those tips. I found too that one tip that another guest of the episode gave me regarding breaks is to make them productive breaks, but more importantly is end the work and start the break on a good note, a high note, so that you're looking forward to getting back into it.
Mhm,
Not just where you're just, okay, I don't really want to go back into this. It's at a
mhm.
low point. This is drudgery. Maybe I'm doing a lot of statistical analysis and it just isn't fun. Try to end on a high note, whether it's before you take a break or at the end of the day. So you look forward to going back to it after the break or the next day.
Exactly. And that's where a lot of folks can learn to tweak the Pomodoro method because Pomodoro is very fixed 25 minutes of work and then 5 minutes of break time. Not all tasks fit within that 25-minute range or and positively within the 25-minute range. So, for those who want to implement the Pomodoro method, you officially have permission to not do it for exactly 25 minutes each time. You can adjust it as you need to throughout the day, but the whole key is you focus for a period of time and then you take a break and you alternate throughout the day.
Also, I found that the hardest part is getting started. And once you get started, it's so much easier. And you even look back on yourself and you say, okay, why did I struggle so much? Or why did I wait this long? It's not nearly as daunting
Mhm.
once you get started. So that first step, starting it is always the toughest step, right?
Exactly. What's that saying? I've always found it very disgusting, but it really is true. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Right.
You just have to start small. So if you could say, okay, if I can just take one big toe size step forward, that's all I need to do. And give yourself permission to just do that. So many of us focus on the end result, and that's so overwhelming because there are so many giant steps involved. So just tippy toe forward, one tippy toe at a time. And it gets easier and easier as you take one more step.
Great. Love it. I've read a couple of the books in habit science by James Clear, Atomic Habits, BJ Fox, Tiny Habits, and they advocate that same approach. Just take that one tiny step. If you want to get in shape,
Mhm.
maybe you want to go to the gym every day. Maybe the first step is just setting your gym clothes by the door
Right.
so that you're that much closer, so that you remove a little bit more of that obstacle. Or if you want to do 100 push-ups,
Mhm.
you start with one push up a day so that you can build that habit over time. Those daily successes reinforce your motivation, get you more motivated to do it again the next day and do maybe two push ups, right?
Mhm. Exactly. One small step. That's what you start with.
Well, I greatly enjoyed our conversation. We'll have to do it again on another episode because there's so much more to unpack with time management and productivity. But unfortunately, we've reached the end of this episode. And I always like to end each episode with a call to action. And I'd love for you to just tell our listeners, Helene, is there one thing that they can do that you have seen time and time again to be immediately applicable? The first thing they could do to win over their time, to be more productive today, whether it's an email, whether it's in decluttering their environment, but give us one or two tips that you think they could do right away that would lead them along that path to being that inefficiency assassin.
The number one tip would be today. In fact, as soon as you're done watching this episode, get your 3 plus 3 ready. Map out your 3 plus 3. Because when you put just a few minutes of thought into what your priorities are, you will just exponentially begin to improve your time management.
Great advice. Remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you.
Absolutely. You can go to timemanagementrevolution.com. I have all of my contact information listed there. And you can also download the productivity kit and have access to resources.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining me today, Helene.
Thanks for having me, Charles.
And this concludes this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. If you like what you heard today, please share this with your colleagues and friends or anyone else you might find who might find this valuable. If you'd like to go and to subscribe to the podcast, that can be found both on Apple and Spotify. It can also be accessed on the Institute for Management Studies website at ims-online.com. I'd love for you to jump over to iTunes and give us your rating and review so that will help us reach others with this great information in this podcast. You can also send us your feedback at info@ims-online.com. And until next time, remember, it's not what you know that makes a difference, it's what you do consistently.